While on my way to work one day, there was one card that actually popped up in my head for no reason, and I thought to myself, why isn't this card seeing much play? That card is Duck Fred Honeywell. See, it synergizes super well with boost cards, but also can enable like a really big hand advantage depending on how your opponent acts against it. So in this video, I want to showcase one of my boost decks, and no, it does not include Amber or Ruby, it's Emerald and Amethyst. Is this a new way to play Green Purple? Let's find out. So up above, you can see the deck that I put together, and you can see we're using Amethyst's unique exert capabilities and challenging, while also utilizing Emerald's really cool boost synergies as well as the bounce effects. The core gameplay of this build is to really just build up a board and make favorable trades with our exert abilities and our damage manipulation cards. And once we're in a good spot, we can start to look to close the games with Genie and Donald Duck's effect, making Genie super boosted and just quest for an insane amount of lore. We also have a lot of cool tricks that we can do with this deck, and I'll go over that, but first I want to talk about some key cards in this deck. So one of the cards I feel pieces this whole deck together is Duck Fred Honeywell. See, while he's in play, if we were to use the boost effect of one card, he lets us take another card from the top of our deck and add it to that boost card when we boost. His second effect lets us draw cards if one of our boosted characters was banished during your opponent's turn, depending on how many cards were underneath that card. His second effect allows us to draw cards if one of our own characters was banished during your opponent's turn, depending on how many cards was underneath that card. This effect includes both boosted cards and as well as shift cards if you were to go that route as well. By the way, both of these effects does stack with each other if you have multiple Donalds on field. See, depending on the board state, Donald really makes it very awkward for your opponent to really challenge into our board easily, because they can end up giving us a huge card advantage if they're not careful. But ironically, the highlight of his card is actually its stats. While it's nothing too crazy, it's not overstat or anything, it's in the magic number of 4. Now why is 4 a magic number for the strength? Well, it means that it can't be red alerted, it can't be firefly swarmed, and it can't be Gaston or World's Greatest Criminal Mind. So surprisingly, having a straight number of 4 actually makes it a lot more difficult with the current decks that we see in play in order to get rid of the Donald Duck. Now something I do want to mention really quick is that let's just pretend we have a boosted card on field as well as Donald Duck. If it were to be Raging Stormed, even though Donald Duck and a boosted card is being banished at the same time, Donald Duck's effect still needs to trigger before the board state clears. So you'll still draw the cards even if you were to get board wiped. But enough of that, let's go on and talk about some of the cards that just really synergizes so well with this card. Now, ever since the release of Cheshire Cat Inexplicable, we've always seen how much impact it has on the meta. We kind of see it with every Amethyst deck that we've seen. But just what if we can make this card even more powerful? His ability to manipulate damage with his boost effect just gives him so much value to his card. Now, under normal circumstances, this effect will only happen once. But not in this deck, it's a little bit different. See, Cheshire's effect triggers whenever a card is put underneath him. So this is where Donald Duck comes into play. With Donald Duck in play, if you were to boost a Cheshire, you get to put 2 cards underneath him, triggering his effect twice, meaning you can move up to 4 damage from anywhere on board onto your opponent's board. I can't explain how satisfying it is when you manipulate 4 damage counter off the effect of 1 Cheshire Cat. It is absolutely amazing. This deck's main way of controlling the board is exerting and challenging, so we should have a good amount of damage counters on our characters in order to manipulate the damage with Cheshire Cat. Aside from Cheshire Cat though, there is actually one more card that I really want to talk about with this boost synergy. And that card is Genie Magical Researcher. See, with his effect, for every card that's underneath him, he gains +1 lore to him. If you had a Genie on board, and then all of a sudden the next turn you slap down a Donald Duck, and now all of a sudden there's 2 cards underneath him, he's questing for 3 out of nowhere. So what does your opponent do against a Genie that's questing for an insane amount and you have a Donald on field? So let's do a little example. What if your opponent is facing against you and you have a Genie with 4 cards stacked underneath with Donald Duck in play? Banish it? Then we'll just draw 4 cards. Ink it? Well, we'll just gain 4 ink then. Bounce it? Well, again, we're just going to pick up the 4 cards that was underneath him into our hand. Stacking a Genie with the help of Donald Duck just makes it insanely weird for your opponent to deal with it. They have to, depending on what deck they play, they have to just cut their losses unless they have a way to deal with the Donald Duck. Because in the end, if they're not dealing with your Genie, then you're questing for an insane amount, which gets you closer to winning some games. The last couple cards I want to really talk about is actually the bounce packages that Emerald provides. and that cards are Mother Knows Best and Put That Thing Back. In our deck, these cards are very surprisingly versatile, especially with the boost energy that we have going on in our deck. We can use it on our opponent's side to prevent some effects from triggering, or even better yet, just slowing down their tempo a little bit. Or we could just use it on one of our own boosted cards, so we'll pick up that card, but also all the cards that was underneath it into our hand. And we know that Donald Duck does a very good job of getting a bunch of cards underneath some cards. Either way, these cards will find some unique plays in his deck, and for me, it just makes it very fun to play around with. Now, let's talk about some of the Mulligan now. We are playing the Louisa shift line, so if you see either one of those components, it's always a good idea to keep one or the other, just so we have a chance for a very strong start with our shifts. If you haven't noticed it, we're not running any 2-drops, aside from Book, which is not a bad idea to just play down, but in the case that we miss our Louisa line, we could always play Flynn on turn 1 and then boost for 2 just to make it a good target. Me personally, I always like to keep one Isis in hand. This deck has a lot of good cheap units that trades very well, so just having a one Isis can really ruin your opponent's game plan. Even though this deck is built around Donald Duck, I wouldn't exactly leave him in my opening hand. The only reason being is that because it's a 4-drop and you still need that extra 8 to boost, he requires a little bit more of a setup in order to use efficiently. So let's recap some of the key points for this deck. What we're aiming to do is to flood our boards with favorable trades and then exerting it all with Isis or Demona in order to really just whittle down our opponent's board. Then with all the damage that we'll have on our characters, we can damage manipulate with Louisa or Cheshire Cat. Then once we see the opportunity, we'll drop down a Donald Duck in order to manipulate more damage with Cheshire's boost effect, or just create a lower threat with Genie Magical Researcher. Then throughout the game, we'll have our song with Mother Knows Best and Put That Thing Back in order to bounce our own cards back for more card advantage, or just bounce their opponent's card back to slow them down a bit while you set up. Now, if I'm being honest here, this is just my first draft of this deck, but I honestly feel like there's so many different ways to build this deck, so these are some of the cards I considered while building this deck. First card I wanted to talk about was Little John and Permanent Outlaw. To put it quite simply, if he's on board and he stays on board, he's a threat. He has the capability of questing for 6, or challenging twice, or singing twice. The possibility with this card is very scary. And funny enough, his strength is actually the magic number 4, so he is a little bit harder to get rid of in this meta right now. For me, I opted not to play him because he is just a little bit costly for an uninkable card, but he's definitely an option to use as a late game ender. So in this deck, I am running Lenny's just to get rid of some of the cards that can get rid of the Donald Duck very easily. But if we're being quite frank, Ursula Deceiver does the same exact thing, but also being a 2-cost and also filling in our 2-drops that we're lacking of. Me personally, I just picked Lenny because it is the singer for Mother Knows Best since it is one of the only songs that we play, but Ursula is definitely not a bad option as well. And the last card I want to mention for this is Goofy, Ghost of Jacob Marley. But the synergy with Donald, we're able to use his ability to stat the Goofy so that whenever it's banished, your opponent has to discard that many cards. So in the past meta, we've seen how discarding your opponent's card can really put a wrench in their plans, but unfortunately with this effect with Goofy and the Donald, it's a little bit too slow, so I opted not to play him right now, but I can see him being a big consideration in his deck in future metas. Anyways, that's gonna wrap up my Amethyst Emerald deck featuring the boosted cards and Donald Duck Fred Honeywell. For me, this is a very fun but honestly like a very honest deck to play. Game's plan is super straightforward, but there's so many cool little tricks and tactics that you can do in order to give yourself an advantage or just really disrupt your opponent as well. I've only really played this online, but I'm actually very much considering building this and bringing it to the Nationals at Anaheim. I'm not there to compete, I'm just there to play some side events and just hang out with some friends. But if you've seen me, feel free to say hi. I'm shy, but I'm very friendly, I promise you that. On another note, my friend Kelsey Hashi helped me with this background. It's amazing, I love it so much. But she's actually been making some lore pads on her new Instagram called Arts by Swanas. And if you see right here, it's a little inverted, but it is super adorable. It's like this beach theme that's going on. Very nice quality. So I am super excited to use this for the next tournaments I play. If you're very interested, link's going to be down in the description. Please check her out. Comment down below if there's any cards or decks that you are curious in finding out, and I'll do my best to try to make up a deck for it. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.